Hello, welcome to Tutoring Chicago's quick guide to developing your students' reading comprehension skills. To support the development of this complex process, there are 3 stages you as a tutor can help with: pre-reading, during reading, and post-reading. The key idea is that as a fluent reader, many implicit aspects of reading are automatic. With a developing reader though, you need to make sure they become explicit so they can acquire them. So here are some quick tips for each phase. When you first pick up a book or a text or bring a digital text up online, discuss the images, cover art, illustrations and photos. Talk about the title, blurb and scan for chapter names or subheadings if it's a non-fiction text. Decide which keywords and concepts you could pre-teach the meaning of to help unlock the text, especially if they're more complex. And then use all of these clues to help your student make predictions. The aim is to engage and validate a student's background knowledge, to give them confidence their experiences bring an important frame of reference to the text, and to celebrate that, as well as prepare them to learn from the new ideas that the text may bring. So then we open up the book and start reading. How can we improve students' understanding while they turn the pages? We're splitting this into early and emerging readers and more confident readers, as the task is very different. For those starting out or a little behind, it is particularly important that students observe punctuation, otherwise it can be very hard to make sense of a text. Having the student make different hand gestures for each punctuation mark you encounter is a really helpful strategy. Also check out Kung Fu punctuation online for some joyful inspiration. Also encourage the student to visualise as they read, to make a movie in their mind, or even draw a quick comic strip scene for each sentence, paragraph or chapter, depending on your student's level of skill. This can be really helpful building their confidence with recalling events and summarising. The burden of having to sound out and decode unfamiliar words can really reduce a student's enjoyment of reading and their ability to summarise what they've read and learned. Obviously, vocabulary size is very important, and explicitly teaching new words in context is effective if they're frequently reinforced. Don't rely only on dictionary definitions though, as sometimes the definition itself can be hard for the student to comprehend. When a new word is encountered, ask students to reread that section and then read ahead to see what would make sense, and use context clues to make an educated guess. Finally, if they need to use a dictionary, have students define their word afterwards using their own vocabulary so that it is better retained. Be sure to reinforce these new words in spoken and written language each week. For more confident readers, rather than say, "Tell me the actions of a particular character," for example, you can use the language of summarising and synthesising. After the appropriate portion, ask students to bring together appropriate information about the character and the plot from across the text to synthesise these details into a coherent summary. Be sure to encourage students to question themselves as they read. Help them become hyper-aware that if they aren't clear on a section, they should reread and read ahead again. Advanced readers' eyes do not march linearly from word to word at a constant pace, but instead flick back and forth to integrate different details from across the text. Also encourage more confident readers to pause and make predictions and inferences, like what is being suggested or implied, and connect their reading to how these ideas are presented in the wider world. To summarise the comprehension task, it can be thought of like this. At a younger age, less mature readers typically identify more emotionally with a text. So their summaries and your questioning should focus on their senses and feelings about characters and what literally happens, simple actions and events. As they develop as readers, you as a tutor can help them to broaden their ideas and look at links and patterns in the text. For example, talking about how a character acts throughout a story and discussing a character's traits such as cruelty, kindness and bravery. Questioning students about the relationships between characters, their similarities and differences, is also a way to develop this comprehension quality. The final stage is the most abstract level of comprehension, going beyond the obvious to consider the deeper meaning by analysing inferences and discussing why a writer may have presented a text in a particular order, for example. So here's a little more on helping students make inferences. The idea is to look at the literal textual evidence, such as actions, events and settings, and then to go deeper, almost if we're using the analogy of an iceberg, to look at the little bits of detail, the ice that pokes above the surface of the water, and then go underneath into the mass that is retained underneath, the inferences that we can make. So, for example, we might look at very basic phrases like something a character said, a description that the character ran away, the sun set. And then we can look at the deeper meanings of it, go beneath the surface and look at intentions, personality and possible symbolism. What do her words suggest? What might their actions imply? What could a particular aspect of the setting represent? Again, a drawing like of a quick comic book scene and then annotations around it of what could be inferred can be fun at this stage. As you probably realise, there are many different aspects to reading, and when they're all working together, they really allow clear, accurate and insightful comprehension. So students need to be able to decode, need to recognise and pronounce and understand the meanings of words. Please check out our other video specifically dedicated to this. We also need to encourage students to skim. So if we're reading something at pace, particularly a non-fiction article, maybe a newspaper, we don't necessarily read every single aspect of it. We might look at the first sentence of each paragraph to get a very basic idea. We might also need to foster the skill of scanning. So that's bypassing sections of the text and honing in on a particular section, maybe when you're reading it for a second time, to really dig deeper into that. So you might quickly look through and find the climax of the story again and then reread just that section. Inferring, as we've just discussed. Analysing, so breaking down a text into smaller parts to explore the relationships between those. So for example, looking at how a character might develop across the story. This is obviously linked to the skill of comparing, so looking at similarities and differences in perhaps the mood or the atmosphere of a story, for example, and how that changes. We also need to build confidence with interpreting stories, so bringing your personal judgment and using your own frame of reference to take a stance on what happens in the story. And then evaluating, judging different ideas about the text, but using evidence, using quotes from the text to support that. All these skills are mutually reinforcing and help us have a strong understanding of a written text. Take time with your student to foster each one through conversation and questioning. Obviously, this is a lot to take in, particularly for our younger students, so we really want to encourage you to develop their skills in annotation. This can be quite elaborate or very simple. Just get those coloured pens, get those highlighters, get those sticky notes. You could even make a code, and to stop it just being a memory burden of thinking about all these different inferences, all these new pieces of vocabulary they've encountered, encourage them to make notes in the margins, highlight, underline, and this will really help them with their summary and their synthesizing. Finally, post-reading. If you've been busy decoding words, looking at punctuation, discussing characters, after all of this, it's important to consolidate. Really, really important for students' retention of ideas. Consider how the story may follow a story arc. Question the student about what the conflict or the climax might be. How was it resolved? Discuss possible themes and genre. Is it a realistic story? Is it fantastical? A horror or a romance? How did the writer gradually build up the story world to maintain our interest? Go back to those first predictions from the pre-reading tasks and confirm or deny those. And transfer the learning into a different task, perhaps a written piece or on an interesting or controversial question about the text. We want to emphasise that there is no quick fix, but your dedication each week really helps. In the spirit of the topic, here is a summary. Feel free to ask your site manager if you have any other questions. Thank you ever so much for listening. We really appreciate all that you do.